When our best fur friends leave our world, many of us are left wanting one last scritch, one last hug, one last walk together. One Last Network is a space for pet guardians to honor their pets in their senior years and to cope with the days leading up to and after their passing. Here's your host, Angela Schneider, founder of One Last Network and Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington.
Welcome to One Last Network and the art of chasing rainbows. Just this side of heaven is a place called Rainbow Bridge. When an animal dies that has been especially close to someone here, your pet goes to Rainbow Bridge. There are meadows and hills for all of our special friends so they can run and play together. There's plenty of food, water, and sunshine, and friends are warm and comfortable. All the animals who have been ill and old are restored to health and strength. Those who were hurt are made better and strong again, like we remember them before they go to heaven. They are happy and content except for one small thing. They each miss someone very special to them who had to be left behind. They all run and play together, but the day comes when one suddenly stops and looks into the distance. His bright eyes are shining, his body shakes. Suddenly he begins to run from the herd, rushing over the grass, his legs carrying him faster and faster. And when you and your special friend finally meet, you cuddle in a happy hug, never to be apart again. You and your pet are in tears. Your hands again cuddle his head, and you look again into his trusting eyes, so long gone from life, but never absent from your heart. And then you cross the Rainbow Bridge together. The Rainbow Bridge has long been a comfort to many whose pets have gone on to the next world. The Facebook photos that get shared whenever someone posts about their loss usually list the author as unknown. It was recently discovered, though, that it was written by a Scottish artist and animal lover, Edna Klein Reiki. She was 19 at the time, more than 60 years ago, and grieving the loss of her Labrador retriever, Major. Her mother suggested she write how she was feeling. She showed it to her friends. They wanted their own copies. It got passed around. It got changed over time. 60 years later, the sentiment remains the same. Our pets are waiting in some supernatural field of flowers and rainbows, waiting for us. And many who are raised to believe in an afterlife find the word soothing, a promise that we'll see our beloved fur friends again. Others find it off-putting. What if there's no afterlife? Why does my dog have to just sit there and wait for me until I die? What if, how does, and why? As a recovering Catholic and an atheist, I wanted to dig deeper into this. Is the Rainbow Bridge the right piece of prose to share with someone whose pet just died? Is it meaningful? Is it hurtful? Or is it an empty gesture like thoughts and prayers? I put my friend Beth Bigler, a pet loss grief counselor and the mastermind behind the Instagram account Honoring Our Animals, on the hot seat. Have a listen. Welcome back to One Last Network, Beth Bigler. How are you doing today?
I am awesome. How are you, my friend?
I am so good. It is blue skies and sunny days in Spokane, Washington. How about you?
It is blue skies and sunny days in Annapolis, Maryland. So we got that in common.
Yeah. All right. We don't need to dig into who you are and what you do because we've done that before. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, Pew Research Center has projected that Christians could make up less than half of the U.S. population in a few decades. PRRI, 2020 Census of American Religion, says that more than 1/3 of young Americans 18 to 29 are unaffiliated in religious beliefs. Now that means atheist, agnostic, or just not identifying with anything. What does that mean to you as you move forward as a pet loss grief counselor?
What it means for pet loss grief counselors and also for people who support guardians who are grieving is that we must strive to be inclusive and open and welcoming for a broad spectrum of beliefs about the afterlife or no belief about the afterlife, and that we have to be able to support and nurture and carry a griever through with the beliefs that matter most to them. I also believe in my work with many clients that we have to also remain open that some of the beliefs may be shaken or destabilized or questioning. I very rarely work with anyone who doesn't end up with some questions, whether they are on one side of a very religious spectrum or on a agnostic or atheist end of the spectrum. Regardless of wherever anyone falls, a major loss, a big death tends to bring up questions and wonder.
On August 20th, 2014, when I announced on Facebook the death of my beloved, I was hit with what? The Rainbow Bridge poem.
Oh, yes.
And I was raised a Catholic. I was very much a lapsed Catholic by 2014. But the Rainbow Bridge poem didn't sit well with me. It felt very empty to me. In these last 9 years, as I have progressed through my agnosticism and all the way through to atheism, I realize now why it never sat very well with me. And it's because I don't believe in an afterlife. And I don't believe that Shep is somewhere waiting for me. But it is an easy response, I think. And it's kind of like the thoughts and prayers of pet loss grief. Do you agree?
Well, I think the poem, the original intent, based on what I know kind of about the origins, and I've delved into this a little bit, is it was a little bit a way to skirt around the idea that animals couldn't get into heaven, because there were some religions and some teachings that made people worry that their animals wouldn't be able to go into heaven. So sort of my understanding of like why it came to be was to kind of help people who were of faith or certain faiths sort of have an easier time believing their animals could be somewhere, even if it can't be heaven. In terms of that, I kind of get it. Like, I kind of get why that may have come to pass in that way. In this moment, do I think it's easier, to kind of to give someone the Rainbow Bridge poem? I think if you believe that the idea of the Rainbow Bridge is very comforting, then it probably feels like a very easy gift to give because you feel so much comfort by it. It doesn't occur to you that someone else may not feel comforted by it. It's also a work of fiction, right? I mean, it's totally invented. So for some people, I think they don't think they're putting necessarily a religious idea in front of you. They're just putting sort of this fantasy in front of you. And so I think for givers of the poem or people who offer that, it is quite easy because they take comfort in it. The problem, of course, is that not everybody feels comforted by it. And that's where it gets a little sticky in terms of receiving it.
So what are some of the most common beliefs or ideas that people hold regarding the afterlife for pets, aside from possibly the Rainbow Bridge?
Well, culturally, I think we don't know much about people's beliefs because people in religious settings may feel uncomfortable. I know for a fact, some people I've worked with feel uncomfortable approaching their religious leaders to do a memorial or burial ritual. I know sometimes people are told, well, we could do that in private, but it's not something we'd mention in front of the congregation kind of thing. So in Christian and even Judaism, Islam, I think a lot of people don't express much about their beliefs just in general. And then even your Eastern traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, they don't have this kind of distinct line between animals and humans the way perhaps those other religions do. But we still don't know much just culturally about what people believe because people don't tend to talk about it. Now, I talk to people all day, every day about their grief in my position. So I can tell you what I have observed. And then also in my Instagram community, a lot of people talk about this. I can tell you that most people I work with do have a belief that somehow, some way, there will be a reunion again with their animal, whether that's through some sort of afterlife experience or whether that's cosmological energy moving around and energy, shifting and bringing them closer to their animal. Many people do believe that there will be some sort of reunion. And also many people I work with believe that whether it's energy or spirit or soul or life force, whatever we want to call it, that their animal's essence is somehow still in the universe. When I poll my Instagram community about this topic, around half of them have a pretty clear belief in an afterlife. And about that many find comfort in the Rainbow Bridge idea. And then usually I've got about like 25% who are kind of questioning and not sure. And then kind of the rest are like, I don't believe in an afterlife, but I may have some questions. So I think like, there's a range in what people believe. And of course, some people believe in an afterlife, like for animals, but not for humans. But then they have questions about that. Well, what does that mean about my beliefs? Or some people believe, I think the Rainbow Bridge is real, but I don't really believe it. So am I a bad guardian? So a lot, again, questions just come up because it's a sensitive topic for people, and culturally we don't discuss it much. So no one feels safe to really talk about it with other people.
You mentioned the idea of energy and photons, and someone on your Instagram page, you've put up a couple of posts about this topic, and they've generated a lot of interesting discussion. But someone mentioned Eulogy from a Physicist by Aaron Freeman. And I read it before we started this discussion, and I felt the tears streaming down my face, because it is far more comforting for me to believe that we become energy, that our energy does not die, and that we are always present with our loved ones. And that, of course, funnels into my belief that as we keep telling stories about our loved ones and pets, we keep them alive. Do you feel like something like that resonates with a lot of your clients?
Well, my biggest wish for anybody that I work with and for anybody who's experienced a pet loss is that they feel they have a continuing connection with their animal. I want every griever to feel that the relationship isn't over, and that their relationship with their beloved can continue, and that their beloved can be included in things, and they can be and that a guardian can be in conversation with their beloved. And so that has nothing to do with afterlife, animal communication, or pet psychic stuff. That has to do with how we continue our relationship and how we continue to tap into, the truth of what that relationship is. I don't believe your animal's gifts, guidance, lessons, and teachings are over when they die from their earthly bodies. Like I believe that we can continue the relationship. And so however that looks to people, however they choose to embrace that, I'm a big fan of. That's why I'm constantly giving tips and ideas and suggestions for, hey, let's keep your animal included. Let's make your animal a collaborator on your day. What project can you do with your animal, even if they're no longer earthside, right? So to me, the most important thing in grief, and of course, this is a recognized grief theory, it's called continuing bonds. We know research back that this is probably the most helpful way, in my opinion, of all the theories to move through grief. But again, it's not a culturally or pop culturally recognized way that we think about grief or talk about grief, but it is, in my opinion, the very best way that we can support pet loss grief.
I completely align with that. When I first read about the continuing bonds theory, I was like, that's it. That's what it's all about right there. It completely resonated with me.
Yep.
So where is Arne right now? And you were not a pet loss grief counselor when Arne left our physical world. No doubt you got hit with the Rainbow Bridge. What was that like? And of course, where is Arne now?
I don't feel bludgeoned when I get the Rainbow Bridge. Just to be clear, you feel hit by it. I don't personally feel bludgeoned by it. You know what I kind of thought the first time, and I don't even remember the first time I heard the Rainbow Bridge, but the first time I heard it, I'm sure my first thought was, you know what? It's nice that pet loss grievers have something, because frankly, we don't have much, right? And even if we don't agree with it or don't like it or it makes us uncomfortable, it's like, at least it's a thing we have, because there's so little for us in the lexicon of any language, any whatever. So, okay, we got a thing. And then, you read it and you're like, ooh, I can see how this will make a lot of people uncomfortable, but I can also see how it might comfort some people. So, okay. And then of course, my third question is probably like, can we do better? I mean, because that's my biggest question about pet loss. Can we do better? Right. I'm always asking that.
Always. Yeah.
But for me, when that comes up, if it comes up, it doesn't offend me, but I don't really think of Arne like sitting there waiting for me somewhere either, but I will tell you, and I remember this so raw, and a lot of you listening are going to relate. Where is he? Where are you? Asking my husband, where's Arne? Where do you think he is right now? What's he doing? Is he okay? Where are you? I remember walking around saying out loud, because I'm a big believer. I was a big believer then, talking to him, where are you? And that hurt. That was hard. And I have a lot of spiritual beliefs. I've done a lot of work on that in my life. And I kind of thought I had it figured out for me, and it didn't matter, because I still was like, where are you? I had a lot more work to do. So when you ask me that now, where's Arne? I always like to say, well, if I knew exactly how it worked, I'd be a billionaire. I don't. I really don't know exactly how this all works. And that's why I'm super open to everything. I'm open to signs. I'm open to interpretations. I'm open to beliefs, because I certainly don't have any answers. But when I had a sense always that Arne was busy. Some of the time I could feel that he was doing something, that he was doing work, that he was probably doing some work, like he helped me in life. I had a sense that he was okay, that he was not in pain. And I do have a sense that he and I will be aligned again in some way together in the future, in a way that will probably be in another sort of physical relationship. And I don't know how that will be, but I think our souls will always be entwined. I'm kind of into that twin flame idea. I think he's probably been with me for many, many lifetimes, and I think he will be with me for many more lifetimes. And I also know, now that I'm doing this work, and I've had some other things sort of happen in this work, I think, well, I know on a Arne and Beth basis, I know he helps me with this work, but I also believe he may be helping some of the animals that I encounter when I'm doing this work. And I have a sense about that. And that is very comforting for me.
And is all that why you were moved to become a pet chaplain?
Well, I was very moved to learn more about how to provide spiritual support, because these were the questions that were coming up a lot for my clients. And so anytime there's something that's coming up all the time, I want to make sure I've got the most tools and insight and wisdom and training to support it. And so I was moved for two reasons. One, I kind of had a strange religious experience growing up, I guess I would say. I was sort of Catholic a little bit, but not really.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that was weird. It was weird. But I actually became kind of like afraid of religion, not afraid, but just like not really understanding what my place might be in it. And I really wanted to explore, but I didn't feel like I could explore. And so I kind of had some of my own sort of spiritual stuff that, I'd done a lot of work around, but I was like, I kind of want to like dive in deeper and just kind of like, look at my own stuff and make sure that's kind of in order before I'm really supporting people spiritually. But then I also just really wanted to understand more about how to approach spiritual care for people. And spiritual care, in my view, includes people even who like aren't sure or have questions or whatever, and look, if I'm working with a client who has zero interest in thinking about afterlife or none of those questions, that's not going to come up in the work. It doesn't need to come up, but it comes up for so many people that I thought it would be wise to learn more and gain more tools and gain more insights so that I could be a better support for others.
Understanding the limitations and or drawbacks to the concept of the rainbow bridge. How do you help someone who doesn't believe in the afterlife find comfort in their pet loss grief?
Well, like I mentioned before, all of us, no matter what we believe, can work on our continued relationship. And that's a big focus of my work in my private practice. And it's a big focus of my work on Instagram, always trying to give people ways to keep this relationship alive, celebrating the lessons you've learned. I also think it's really important to allow people room for rituals, memorials, and ceremonies that don't feel religious. Some people, are afraid to do some sort of celebration of life or, memorial because they think it has to be religious and they don't have a religious perspective or an afterlife perspective. So I work with a lot of people to craft ceremonies and craft rituals because that can feel very supportive and it doesn't have to be about an afterlife. I do my monthly memorial service on Instagram for animal guardians, and we're never really talking about afterlife in there. Maybe I'll have a reading every now and then that touches on that, but you don't need to be a believer in afterlife to ritualize, memorialize, and celebrate your animal. And there are some people who have questions about that. Also, there's, I have a lot of clients who maybe don't believe in an afterlife, but they're interested in kind of doing other things that might make them feel connected, that feel spiritually adjacent, which is cool. So I teach a lot of people about tarot, because tarot is something that if you're interested in doing, you don't need to have any sort of intuitive ability or any, it doesn't have to be a spiritual practice, but it can be too. It's one of those things that can kind of go both ways. And so a lot of my clients get really into doing tarot or oracle cards to feel like they have a ritual with their animal, but it's not specific to afterlife. Right. So I think the way we support it is just allowing room and space for exploration and reassurance that you don't have to think of it a certain way in order to celebrate your animal, to continue your relationship with your animal, and of course, to memorialize your animal in whatever way you see fit. I will say from a non-grief counseling perspective, but all of us trying to support other grievers around us, we just have to be very careful to watch what we say. And we talked about this last time, mirror people when they are talking to you. So if someone says, oh, I'm so sad Arne went to the Rainbow Bridge, but I know he's there with Zelda, and so that feels good, then that's your permission slip to talk about the Rainbow Bridge all you want and send them a Rainbow Bridge, poem or wind chime or whatever you want to do. That's what's making them feel supported. But if someone doesn't use that language with you first, gentle reminder, let's not bring it up. Let's not talk about it if someone doesn't say it first, would be my recommendation. That's the best support we can do as people who are, friends and family.
We both have learned, you as a counselor and I as a coach, to meet people where they are, which is what you're alluding to, and to understanding who people are before we open our damn mouths. And that's fine for us. We're in a position to be helping people, but it's not something that the everyday Joe is going to just automatically, they're going to go for that, as I mentioned earlier, that easy way to provide comfort. So how do we move forward the idea that maybe we just don't? As normal human beings on Facebook, we don't rush to thoughts and prayers or Rainbow Bridge or what have you.
Well, I think it's tricky. That's a tough question because we know, in this case, we know 50% of the people are going to feel very, that's going to mean something to them if you say the Rainbow Bridge. So I think we want to not shut ourselves down completely to feel like we can't say anything. One of the things people say to me all the time is, I don't know what to say, so I'm not saying anything. And I'm like, oh my goodness, could you please just say something? Can we please just say something? But so your question's a tough one. I think the way that I would advise anyone going forward of how do we do better is to be a great listener, or in this case, a great reader. So if someone makes a caption, because you're kind of talking about on social media, right? If someone makes a big caption on on Instagram or Facebook about their animal, really read it. Read what they say, because a lot of times, let me tell you, people aren't reading the captions for sure. Even on like these kind of things. Oh, your dog died. Okay, I'm going to say thoughts and prayers, whatever.
Right.
So go in and really read it. And my recommendation would be, if you don't know the person very well, or you don't know if that's going to feel supportive, rather than saying, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you prayers, or I'm going to whatever. Go look at what they wrote. Oh my gosh, it looks so much like Susie loved swimming in the water. What an amazing thing that she got to go on so many trips. Thank you for sharing her with us. Please keep sharing photos and memories. I'd love to hear more about her, or something, right? Affirming what you've seen, comment on something specific about the animal's life, use their name, and just encourage sharing, encourage that you want to hear more. And then maybe if that person shares more, maybe they'll say, I've been praying to see her again. I've been praying for a sign. So then, okay, prayers seem to be cool. If I'm someone who wants to offer a prayer, then maybe they'll say, oh, I'm sending a prayer that you'll get a sign, right? You just got to really listen and read and mirror back where people are. Now, I also like to say, don't say anything disingenuous. So like, if you don't believe in prayer, if you're not a big prayer, don't say you're going to pray. Like, that's weird too. So, you have to do what's right for you, but also really try to do right for them. I mean, the whole problem here is that we are a grief illiterate and death illiterate culture. And so we are, and especially with pet loss, because it's a disenfranchised grief. So we have to, slowly try to start changing the way we do this as a culture. And we're working on it, right? That's why we're having this conversation. We're trying to get better.
I was on a podcast recently with Tori Mystic, and she said that anytime anyone said, I'm so sorry, or I'm praying for you, when she experienced grief, it just felt empty on her. And all she wanted to hear was, that fucking sucks. That's exactly what she said. She said, I wanted somebody to agree with me that this fucking sucks. And I said, hey, you know what? It does. It fucking sucks. You've lost an important being in your life, and it sucks. Let's cry over it. So I just wanted to mirror her language and allow her the space to feel right, that it fucking sucks.
Definitely. I mean, I think if we can show up for people and say, this is really hard, I don't have any magic words. I wish I could say something that would make this better, but I'm here with you. I'm here for you. I'm listening. Share whatever feels right for you to share. And I'm right here. Can also be very reassuring. At the same time, though, like for me personally, I still say to people, I am so sorry you are going through this. I'm so sorry you've had this loss, because I am, and I know that some people don't like, I'm sorry. And I suppose it might depend on who it's coming from or how well they know you. But I'm still personally not afraid to say that to people, because I am so sorry that anyone has to go through the pain of pet loss grief. And so, again, it's kind of like we have to stay true to ourselves, but we also want to be mindful of trying to support what other people want. The problem is everyone's so different about this. I mean, someone can talk to me about the Rainbow Bridge all day and I'm not going to be offended. And then other people, you're going to say Rainbow Bridge and they go into a panic because they think their animal is like stuck somewhere waiting for them. So it is hard to show up and say, quote, the right thing. And so I don't like to say like there's only one right thing to say, because then some people get paralyzed. They're like, well, I can't say I'm sorry. I can't say thoughts and prayers. I can't say, and then sometimes they shrivel away and they don't want to say anything, which I think is worse. So I still say, even if you're not sure, even if, and also for people listening, please don't give yourself a hard time right now. If you've said thoughts and prayers or sorry for your loss or anything, like, or you've said Rainbow Bridge and maybe now you're thinking maybe I shouldn't have, please don't beat yourself up or give yourself a hard time. Give yourself a pat on the back for saying anything at all to someone who's lost an animal, because so many people just don't say anything. So we're all here to learn. We're all here to kind of get more comfortable with how we approach this. And so, we're all evolving in this together, myself included. So I just don't want anyone listening thinking, oh, I messed it up so many times. You didn't. You didn't.
Absolutely. When I say it falls empty on me and I don't want to say I'm sorry, that's my personal shit. that is all about who I am and how I want to move forward in the world. It doesn't have to apply to anybody else. Um, but
Totally.
as you mentioned, your Instagram feed, you've had two very recent posts about this exact topic with Rainbow Bridge, and I just wanted to go through some of the comments and get you to react.
Okay.
That's fair?
Yeah.
Even though you've already reacted in some way by replying to some of the comments, but uh, one gal said that the Rainbow Bridge is the pet equivalent of they're in a better place.
I get that. I mean, I hear that. I hear that from my clients, like they get all these Rainbow Bridge cards, but they're like, this doesn't resonate with me, and I don't feel better thinking my animal's at the Rainbow Bridge. So, I understand that reaction, for sure. And most people grieving, if you say they're in a better place, they're going to say, no, the better place would be here with me, unless they have a religious belief that where they do think they're in a better place. And there are many people who believe that as well. So, if you're not someone who likes they're in a better place, you're probably definitely not going to like the Rainbow Bridge. That's truth.
I like to think her soul is omnipresent, that I am carrying her with me still, just in spirit.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Doesn't it?
That sounds nice. Yeah. It's kind of how I
That's,
feel about Arne. I feel like Arnie's like right here, right now, all the time. Like
yeah.
just forever and around me. And there's times when I feel like he's busy. I mean, I do get that busy feeling. But there's really never a time I don't. I feel like Arne is in me. I feel like he's part of my DNA. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's no, when people say I'm so afraid I'm going to forget my animal, I'm like,
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna get dementia. My whole family has dementia. I'm gonna be over in the community for the dementia people, and I'm gonna be petting that imaginary cat and saying Arnie's name. And I'm not gonna know my favorite Christmas carol, and I'm not gonna know anybody in my family, but I'm gonna be slurping my soup and I'm gonna be talking about Arnie. That's how sure I am. I'm never ever gonna forget him. He's in me. He's with me, and I'm gonna be petting the air, and I'm gonna be saying his name. And I know that to be true about myself.
That was a hell of a visual. Thank you.
You're welcome. Here to help.
I'm just picturing Beth slurping her soup, petting an imaginary cat. KJ Rutz says that she prefers we focus on them in the state we knew them and talk about what they leave behind for us rather than using the poem or anything to try and prescribe a set of beliefs. It's a very kind sentiment and it acknowledges the relationship and the pain of losing without asking anything of the grieving.
Yep. That's why you hear me 24/7 talking about gifts, guidance, lessons, and teachings. Those aren't just, fake words for me. It's things we can live by. So I love asking grievers, tell me some things your animal taught you. Tell me some things about their legacy that you're going to carry forward. Tell me about your animal's values and how you are living their values, right? I do love talking about not just memories, but who they are, what they're about and how we can keep living that. So I'm all about that comment.
I don't believe in it, but it presents my grief in a hopeful, peaceful way.
That's just it, right? It brings a lot of people comfort, even if they don't believe in it. The idea that we will reunite is very deep, even if you're not religious. And the idea that your beloved is happy, because in the poem, it's the idea that your animal is happier and healthy and carefree. And it doesn't necessarily lessen your grief, but for many people, it brings solace. And even if you don't believe it, you might feel some of that solace.
It makes my heart ache. It's too forced. It feels like my pet is waiting for me somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people also say not just forced, but childish. I've had a few people in my private practice talk about that, that it kind of pejorative. A lot of people already feel kind of dismissed or in their grief. And this kind of makes that part worse too. That's what I think of when I think of the forced part. For a lot of people, it's like it just seems kind of cheesy and And a lot of people, let's talk about the thing we talk about on my Instagram all the time, that pet loss can oftentimes hurt worse than human loss. A lot of my clients feel it's sort of weird to have something that's totally separate for animals than humans, even though everybody I work with values their animals as much, if not more, than the humans in their life. And so there's also like a thing that a weird division that goes on, like, why are we treating them different than how we might treat a human? Because the loss is as significant.
Yeah, one person said it casts doubt for her that her pet spirit is carried on and whether hers will. Her dog's death threw her into an existential crisis, desperately seeking validation of an afterlife.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I did the chaplaincy work. I mean, that's why, because this crisis happens. Or like, a lot of people have felt very secure in some of their human loss. So they have a grandparent or a parent or a sibling that has died, and they feel very confident about how they see that person's afterlife. But then when it's their animal, and then the Rainbow Bridge idea comes in, it's like, wait, are they not with my mom? Are they not with my grandma? My grandma loved her. Are they not together? I mean, that also really agitates people sometimes, is the fear that, like, because they're in this separate place, are they not with the humans who love them earthside? Which is a whole other thing.
It does carry with it, obviously, hope. And even as an atheist, the thought of an afterlife is lovely.
Yeah.
The thought of a place where I'm going to see Shep again is wonderful. I just don't think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
So that stuff just doesn't land for me, but I definitely see how it would land for people who do believe.
Well, the emotion that comes up for me when I even just listening to you talk, right? It's like the uncertainty. And so many of us who've gone through the death of an animal, the death was preceded by a lot of uncertainty. Not everybody, but for anybody who went through a long medical struggle or a decline that they could see, that whole anticipatory grief period is just pure uncertainty, right? And fear. And so in post-loss, and this happens even if you had a sudden death or an accidental death, that uncertainty about the afterlife and the fear about the afterlife stuff can sometimes like really be elevated because you've just come off this period of massive uncertainty about when will they die and how will it be, and I'm afraid they're going to die and what's it going to be like when they die, and oftentimes the afterlife fears and uncertainty really come on strong because you've been living in this fear and uncertainty mode, and it doesn't just dial down the second that your animal dies. So people not knowing how it works, being afraid, like, does it work the way I think it does? Does it work at all? Is it a thing? That's a whole kind of cycle of uncertainty and fear that, it takes some work to kind of de-escalate from.
This last comment that I will read to you kind of dovetails into a whole other episode we could do. She said, I wish I could believe in an afterlife, but I don't. When people bring the Rainbow Bridge up in a serious discussion, I can appreciate it as a metaphor and a visual. I find it to be a painful reminder of how lonely I can feel to know I will never see or meet them again.
Yeah.
That loneliness is probably one of the hardest parts of grief.
Especially with our animals. Because they were always there. They were our constant. Yeah. And, I think like also related to this is just the idea that someone created it, and like it's an imaginary folklore thing also feels unsettling. But a lot of people say to me when I'm working, I want to believe it, but I don't. And does that make me a bad guardian? Or like, I wish I could believe it. Like, there's a lot of this, like, I wish it, suited me. And then there's some people I've worked with who kind of like, they want to go back and forth. Do I believe it? Don't I believe it? And you know what I say about everything is, does it feel supportive to you? And if in this moment it feels supportive to imagine it that way, let's imagine it that way as an experiment this week. Let yourself, let yourself, it's okay to believe it. A lot of people are always like, well, am I just trying to talk myself into something that feels comforting? And I'm like, wherever you want to get comfort, if this does feel comforting, let's go with it. And if later you decide you don't want to believe it anymore, you don't need to believe it anymore. But, I think we're also really hard on ourselves about where we find comfort or where we don't find comfort. Like whether or not you find comfort or don't find comfort, we find a way to beat ourselves up about it. So also just being very gentle with ourselves, being kind to ourselves about, does this feel supportive? If it doesn't, that's okay. I'm not a bad person because it doesn't feel supportive. I mean, that's a whole other thing we can get into, but that's a really big thing I'd like to validate for anybody listening is like, whether it does or whether it doesn't, you're doing it right. There's no right or wrong here. There's no rules. There's no requirements. You are not a better guardian to your beloved because you believe in it or don't believe in it. And that's something I wish everybody could internalize, because the last thing we need to be doing is judging ourselves about our reaction to the Rainbow Bridge.
If I decided tomorrow that I was going to start believing in an afterlife, and then next week decided to go back and not believe in an afterlife, that's my journey. As long as it's not hurting anybody else.
Right.
That's the key, right? We grieve individually. And there is no set way to grieve. There is no timeline for grieving. There is no book on how we should do it. It's all us. And the support that we get.
Yeah. That's right. There are no rules. I made a post today on Instagram about the quote rules, for the first week of pet loss, which is basically that there are no rules. My only rule always is, no self-destruction, no self-harm, of course. But aside from that, do whatever you want to do, say whatever you want to say. Don't do whatever you don't want to do. There's no real roadmap for this. Certainly there's things we can do to support ourselves and, find community and share and express. I mean, there's things that can be supportive for people, but the truth is this is so individual. It's so private. And, the questioning that comes up around the Rainbow Bridge, around afterlife, around where are you? A lot of times that's just so internal and so, not voiced anywhere. And so I just love that we're having this conversation. This is why I keep having this conversation on my Instagram and trying to help everybody feel included. I love the Rainbow Bridge people. I love people who believe in a certain, afterlife situation. Like they're inspiring. I'm like, that's so interesting. Like, you totally got this Rainbow Bridge thing down. And like, I think that's, beautiful. And I also think it's beautiful if you're like, there's absolutely nothing that happens after we die. Like I am good on my science. I got a lot of those folks too, and I have everybody in between. And I think the more we can just express this, vocalize it, be supportive of each other, be inclusive of each other, and learn. This is all really about learning to me. This is like we are charting new territory for the way we talk about pet loss grief and the way we talk about guardians and the way we talk about this whole experience. And so, you and I and everybody listening, we are the people that will start to make people more comfortable with wherever they are on this side of the journey.
What is one last piece of advice from Beth Bigler?
About the Rainbow Bridge?
About anything. About grieving, about loss, about anything.
The thing that's coming to mind right now is just beware your definition of progress. Trying to think about why that's coming to mind. I think it's really resonating with me. Even in this topic, like we are so hard on ourselves about, I should have made more progress right now. I should have been over it by now. I still don't know what I believe about the Rainbow Bridge. Why don't I have a better idea? It's been 6 months, right? We're hard on ourselves about quote progress. I'm putting in big quotation marks, progress. So I just always want to validate for grievers today. The thing I want to say about it is just, let go of this idea of like that you have to make a certain amount of progress in a certain amount of time. I don't even know what progress looks like, right? I just hope that everybody, as they move through their grief, things just start to feel a little lighter and a little lighter as they go. And then you're going to have some bad weeks where things feel heavier and heavier, and then maybe a little lighter. But the problem with some of our communities, our social media communities, is that we compare ourselves to others. And we say, oh, well, that person's 3 months out. They're doing so much better than I am. Am I doing it wrong? And so I just think be very mindful that you have your own definition of progress. And I always say to people, think back to day one, think back to week one, think about what it was like then, and look at where you are now. You are moving through this the way you are meant to move through it. And have patience with yourself about that.
Thank you for showing up for us today.
Thanks for having me. I love this conversation. I'm ready to do another one. You tell me.
I will have you back on anytime. You
All right,
and
my
Colleen
friend.
Ellis, I'm just gonna get all three of us to just sit here and gab about grief.
That'd be amazing. She's
Wouldn't
a
it?
queen. Yeah.
Ah, my queen. Mhm.
Yes. Yes.
You want a physicist to speak at your funeral, writes Aaron Freeman in a eulogy from a physicist. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy, so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid energies of the cosmos, you gave as good as you got. And at one point, you'd hope that the physicist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell him that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their waves forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let her know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are her eyes, that those photons created within her constellations of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And the physicist will remind the congregation of how much all of our energy is given off as heat. There may be a few fanning themselves with their programs, as he says it, and he will tell them that the warmth that flowed through you in life is still here, still part of all that we are, even as we who mourn continue the heat of our own lives. And you'll want the physicist to explain to those who loved you that they need not have faith. Indeed, they should not have faith. Let them know that they can measure, that scientists have measured precisely the conservation of energy and found it accurate, verifiable, and consistent across space and time. You can hope your family will examine the evidence and satisfy themselves that the science is sound and that they'll be comforted to know your energy's still around. According to the law of the conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You're just less orderly. Amen. Now that brings me a little peace. To think that our energy will never die. To think that our loved ones' energy remains with us as we take our walks toward the end. Because it does. We are accumulation of the experiences we've had and the people and animals who've been a part of those experiences. Like Beth says, Arne is a piece of her DNA now. Shep is a part of me, even though he has not physically been by my side in almost 9 years. His energy remains. His stories will be told. And that's the key to keeping our loved ones' energy alive, telling their stories. I'm always here for a listen if you need someone to hear your pet story. Drop me a line at Angela at One Last Network or send me a DM on at One Last Network, Instagram or Facebook. Next week, it's just me digging into the emotion of guilt when it comes to grief. I'll try to figure out why we keep asking ourselves those coulda, woulda, shoulda questions that torture the high holy hell out of us. Until then. I'm Angela Schneider, owner of Big White Dog Photography in Spokane, Washington, and your host at One Last Network, signing off to go get some Bella snuggles. Listen to One Last Network on whichever podcast platform you prefer. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you have a friend who might be interested in our content, make sure you share us with them. Thanks for listening.